It's hard to imagine any leader walking into a bigger storm than the one Franklin D. Roosevelt faced back in March of 1933. His entire presidency was basically forged in the fire of one massive crisis, only to be thrown immediately into another, even bigger one. This is the story of how he managed to navigate both.
And this is what makes FDR's story so incredible, really. He's the only president who had to steer the United States through its two greatest challenges of the 20th century. First, you've got this economic collapse that brought the entire country to its knees. And then, a global war that threatened the very idea of democracy. This double whammy would define him, and in the process, it would completely redefine America.
And that first crisis, wow, it was a big one. You gotta picture the scene. It's March 1933. America is at rock bottom. Banks are closed, millions have no work, and hope is pretty much gone. And into all this despair steps Roosevelt. And in his first speech as president, he delivers one of the most famous lines in American history, speaking directly to the fear that had paralyzed the nation.
Sometimes a single number tells you everything you need to know. 25%. That's not just a number on a page. That's 1 out of every 4 people in the workforce, with no job, no money, and honestly, not much hope of finding anything. The scale of the devastation was just staggering. And the collapse wasn't just in one area. It was everywhere, all at once. Factories were just silent. Farms were failing. People were losing their homes. And the banking system, the very foundation of the economy, had ground to a complete halt. I mean, the country was truly at its wit's end.
So how could one person possibly face all of this? Well, to get that, you really have to look at the personal crisis he'd already been through. It's a story of incredible hardship that, you could argue, perfectly prepared him for what was to come.
I mean, just look at his career path. The guy was a political rocket ship, a rising star, clearly on his way to the top. He's a state senator, a top official in the Navy, and then he's nominated for vice president, all before he's even 40. And then, bam, in 1921, everything comes to a screeching halt. A paralytic illness believed to be polio paralyzes him from the waist down. It looks like his career was completely over. But here's the thing, he didn't quit. Instead, he fought back with this unbelievable determination. And this little detail tells you so much about him. He worked for years to teach himself how to walk just short distances with these heavy steel braces and a cane, all to project an image of strength. He took control of the story, refusing to let the public see him as disabled. So you have this guy, forged by his own personal fire, and he takes that same resilience and applies it to the Great Depression. He didn't come in with one fixed plan. He came in with an attitude he called the New Deal, which was basically a promise to try anything and everything to fix the country. And his approach was actually pretty straightforward. He broke it down into what he called the 3 R's. First, immediate relief for the millions of people who were starving and homeless. Second, a plan for the recovery of the whole economy. And third, deep reform of the financial system so that a disaster like this could never, ever happen again. Simple, direct, and action-oriented. And from that simple framework came this explosion of new programs that completely changed American life. And what's wild is how many of them are still around today. Social Security, the FDIC that insures your bank account, the SEC that watches over Wall Street. These weren't just temporary patches. They were fundamental changes to the way America worked. This quote right here, this is the key to everything. This tells you exactly how he thought. He wasn't stuck on one ideology. He was a pragmatist. His whole philosophy was, let's try this. If it works, fantastic. If it fails, okay, admit it and try something else. But the most important thing was to do something. Okay, so just when it feels like the country is maybe, just maybe, getting back on its feet, a whole new storm starts gathering on the horizon. The battle against the Depression was about to transform into a global war against fascism, and Roosevelt had to switch from being a domestic reformer to a wartime commander-in-chief. Now, long before the U.S. officially got into the war, FDR saw what was coming. He knew the Axis powers were a huge threat, but he had a problem. America was deeply isolationist. So he came up with this brilliant strategy. He framed the U.S. not as a fighter, but as the great arsenal of democracy, the country that would build the weapons for Great Britain and others to win the fight. And then it happened. The moment that changed absolutely everything. The attack on Pearl Harbor just shattered America's neutrality in an instant. And with these famous words, Roosevelt captured the nation's shock and rage and united everyone for the fight ahead.
And as a wartime leader, wow, he moved fast and made some massive calls. He formed the crucial Big Three alliance with Churchill and Stalin. He decided on a Europe-first strategy to take down Germany. He gave the green light to the top-secret Manhattan Project to build the atomic bomb. And even while the war was raging, he was already thinking ahead, laying the foundation for what would become the United Nations. So steering the country through not one, but two back-to-back crises of that magnitude, that's just unprecedented. But like with any powerful leader, his legacy is complicated. It's not a simple story, and to really understand it, you have to look at all of it.
It really is a story of two sides, isn't it? On the one hand, you have this incredible list of achievements, saving the country, creating the social safety net, and leading the world to victory over Nazism. But on the other hand, you have these actions that are, deeply controversial and have been rightly criticized, like the internment of Japanese-American citizens, his attempt to pack the Supreme Court, and his failure to really push for civil rights legislation. And yet, the American people elected him 4 times. 4. Think about that. It just shows you the incredible connection he had with the public during these terrible times. It's something we'll never see again. Literally, it's against the law now. So at the end of the day, whether you think he was a savior or that he went too far, you just can't deny his impact. Before FDR, most people didn't expect much from the federal government in their daily lives. After FDR, there was a new understanding that the government had a real responsibility to help provide economic security for its citizens. That was the game changer. And that really brings us to the big question, the one that hangs over his entire legacy. Roosevelt's presidency shows what a strong executive can do when facing a total disaster. But it also makes you ask, where does that necessary use of power end, and where does the danger of it going too far begin? It's a question that's just as important today as it was back then.